Welcome into K-State Online. I am Mason Voth. That is Drew Calloway here on a Thursday. And once again, we've had them kind of back up on each other. So we owe you some commitment breakdowns and some updates with how things are going in the transfer portal for K-State football. And the good news is things are going pretty well for K-State right now. We've got a pair of commits to talk to you about today. Both, I think, a lot of fans were happy with these additions for different reasons. So we'll get into that and discuss all of that today. But first, reminder for everybody out there that K-State is getting ready to play their very next football game in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. They will be going to Dublin, Ireland later this year. Now we are officially in 2025 and kick off their season in week 0 against Iowa State. And if you want the best way to get over there, the best way to secure tickets right now, hospitality packages, basically, if you want to live like a king in Ireland, watching the Cats play some football, you need to go to cats2ireland.com. So that's the best way to do it. Get yourself and your family set up to go watch the game, or tell the family you're doing something for yourself here and you really want to go watch the Cats in Ireland, and there's no reason to take a 1-year-old with you. Leave your family in the dust and go to Ireland, and maybe we go with some coworkers like I am. Say, take that family. You will not be with me. I guess my daughter will be 2 by then, but I'll also have like a 4-month-old by that point. So I'll have 2 kids that I'll be saying, sayonara, dad's out of here. I'm going to watch the Cats. You should do that too. Cats2ireland.com. You got an Ireland fun fact lined up for us today.
Oh, we're lined up. I actually have a few that with how basketball's gone that I have like started off for like a basketball video of like of kind of like the Titanic a little bit, but not as bad. This one today, Dublin, founded by Viking.
Okay. That's good. That's good news for the Vikings fans out there. Maybe it's an omen. You're watching this and you're like, hey, Vikings founded Ireland. Cats are playing in Ireland. Maybe the Vikings are going to win whoever they're playing in the playoffs this weekend. I don't know who it is. I guess it'd be
The
what they'd be
Rams.
playing the 4. So are they playing?
They're playing at the Rams.
Okay, yeah, the NFC West champ. There you go. Look, who cares? NFL doesn't matter right now, right? I mean, Chiefs aren't playing this weekend. You got to wait. The Cowboys did not make it. Obviously, not playing Deuce Vaughn enough apparently is their problem. That's the hill that I'll die on. So we'll move on. We'll talk about the stuff that people really care about right now, and that would be K-State landing a couple of transfers, and we'll start with a guy that K-State really wanted out of high school. We talked about him in our recruiting update earlier this week because it felt like K-State might be on the verge of making something happen there. And they get Jayshawn Ross, originally from Kansas City, committed to Alabama. It felt like K-State was right there. And I think there was a point where you and I were both thinking this is going to happen. And then we saw that Nick Saban offer come in, and we're like, oh, see you later. And I think that day, the second I saw the Alabama offer, I think I put in my prediction for Alabama. Jayshawn Ross, obviously, it ends up not being Nick Saban. That's his coach down there. He gets down there for 1 year, only appeared in 1 game, took some snaps, and decides that Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide program, not for him, in the portal. And now K-State gets a guy that was a top 150 player in the 2024 class with 4 years of eligibility remaining. What do you make of K-State actually being able to land Jayshawn Ross, and then what this might look like on the field?
It's a fun addition because I think that you look at this as he is essentially like another high school commit because he's so young. And K-State recruited him so hard out of high school and was right there, like you said. I think that it is firmly K-State finished second and likely would have landed Ross, which is why like a lot of the excitement for me is like he's essentially the same player. Like there's no reason to think that he is anything different than he was out of high school at this stage. So that makes it really fun and adds to you kind of look at what Bud Elliott has called like the blue chip ratio of like the 4 and 5 star prospects that you have. This team for K State might end up having the most in a really long time if you look at what this next roster is going to have. But Ross can add a lot of different things because he can play that like Sam hybrid linebacker position that I've talked about, where he is kind of like that pass rushing and bigger Sam, where It's kind of like what Khalid Duke could have been pre-knee injuries, or he could also play defensive end and put his hand on the ground and just go. So I'm excited about that for a couple reasons. And I also think that you can never add too many pass rushers. And you look at what the defensive end group did at K-State this year. I know that they were headlined by Brendan Mott, who won Big 12 defensive lineman of the year. But you look at all of those other guys that are really young, that this room is probably in the best shape out of any heading into 2025. And that's saying something because I really like the safety group. I obviously really like the running back group. So you look at the defensive ends or wherever Ross ends up, his addition can really booster and bolster multiple positions. And I think that that's a good thing.
It's dangerous to start saying that we like certain position groups this early because we did that with the safeties this past year, really the secondary in general, and we saw how that worked out.
To be fair, 2 of the 3 safeties I think were still good. Like Marquis Siegel, I think has got too much flack.
But yeah, Marquis Siegel did not deserve to be in that. VJ Payne struggled early, and then Jordan Riley was a mess from the get-go, and it never really rebounded until the end of the year when it was like, oh, great, but you've already lost to Houston, and it was it's just bad, not great there. But yes, this adds to a pretty significant room that K-State has, and having that positional flexibility is probably significant when you just talk about how you're able to make sure you're retaining the players you already have that you want to keep around, combined with getting a best player available type like Jayshawn Ross, because this certainly wasn't like a major position of need for K-State or something they needed to address. But once again, when you look and you see, okay, we wanted this guy really bad out of high school, top 150 guy, and I like what you said. He's still the same guy, basically, because that's one of the biggest gripes that I have with the transfer portal and the way guys get graded out. And I understand there's really no good solution to it because Jayshawn Ross was a 4-star last year. He gets that 3-star tag in the portal, but that's, more so because you're kind of grading these guys off of what are they going to provide immediately. And you look at Jayshawn Ross, well, year 1 at Alabama, he didn't see the field really. So I think that's where this comes from. So I wouldn't have anybody get distracted by what the transfer rating is for Jayshawn Ross. Focus on the fact that, just a year ago, he was in that same category of player that a guy like Gus Hawkins was, who's at K-State on the offensive line, that you're thinking sometime in the near future you'll be seeing on the field and being a really good offensive lineman. So I think that's significant, and you see this guy also local Kansas City. Go out, bring him in, and there's a lot of upside here. And now K-State has him on the roster, and you're going to get another kind of toy to play with where you can try and plug and play here or there and do a lot of different things. And K-State's done that over the years with Khalid Duke. Sticks out. They kind of tried it with Toby Asensami, and then I think they finally realized, okay, we know that his home needs to be as a kind of a more traditional pass rushing defensive end. So they weren't jostling him back and forth as much. But Jayshawn Ross is going to be a fascinating one to follow, and really excited about this pickup. I mean, this is probably one of my 3 favorite grabs that K-State's gotten in the portal this year. And again, it doesn't come at a position of need, but it's just really fun to think about what the possibilities are for K-State landing him.
Yeah, I'd say it's firmly in my top 4. I would need to go and do some more digging on what my top 3 would end.
No, let's do it right now. Rank them 1 through 11. Your portal commitments. No, I'm not gonna make you do that.
But you look at Ross, and it is fun, and like the upside, I think, is what makes it such an exciting get. Because to be honest with you, I don't really know what Jayshawn Ross will provide next season yet. He's kind of an unknown at this level so far because he only played in 1 game, that's against Mercer at Alabama, and I believe he was injured for some of the year as well. So you kind of look at that, and you're like, okay, we don't really know what he is yet, but we know that he was really, really good out of high school and really well thought of with how highly he was ranked. He's a freak athlete. I mean, I said on the Bosco Boys episode that dropped today, how many defensive ends / linebackers do you know that played wide receiver in high school and were the second best wide receiver on their team? And the one that was the best, was also a power forward wide receiver. So you look at that, that's just the kind of athlete that he is. And if they can really unlock that and let him be able to develop and play, I think that he can be a special kind of defensive end linebacker position. And that's kind of just where football is going. You get your biggest and best athletes, you find a spot for them on the field, and you just kind of let them go.
Yeah. Yep. It's a good pickup for K-State to add to their number. Now, they also added yesterday to their number of commitments in this transfer portal cycle. And again, if you're trying to keep track of it, you can do it all at On3, but I'll give you the numbers right now. K-State has, at this moment, 17 players that have entered the transfer portal. A number of them have found homes now. The most recent was Justin Wolf, who was a walk-on tight end. He's going to Western Kentucky. The Wildcats in the portal that found new homes: Carver Willis to Washington, Trey Spivey to Arizona, Jordan Dunbar to Bowling Green, Terry Kirksey to UConn, Wolf to Western Kentucky, Donovan Ryman to Louisiana Tech, Keegan Johnson to New Mexico, and another one that may have snuck under the radar, Nikendre Steiger, ends up at Old Dominion. So K-State, we also know, position of need is something you have to address in the transfer portal. They did this with the addition that they made last night to get portal commit number 11. That would be Brandon Sney out of Wagner. So jumping up from the FCS level to FBS. But this is a guy that was pretty highly sought after from a number of comparable schools at the Power 4 level. You see some of the offers there: Colorado, Cal, Houston, Illinois. And we know Colorado could use all the help that they could get on the offensive line. So what do you think of K-State being able to pull off this commitment here that I think a lot of other people were on board with when they saw that K-State was able to get the commitment?
Yeah, tackle is a big position of need for K State. You look at what ends up happening this offseason. You lose Easton Kilty to graduation. You lose Carver Willis a little bit unexpectedly to the transfer portal. And I think that that kind of makes tackle the one spot that I think K State really, really needed to address and still hadn't addressed it until yesterday, which made it a little bit scary and made you think about, okay, do you really go with some of these younger guys? Well, now you got Brandon Sney, and we've talked about the potential of Jayshawn Ross is probably higher than Sney because he's younger, but Brandon Sney's potential is through the roof. Like he has elite measurables. He's 6'7", has an 84-inch wingspan, with a converted tight end, which is kind of scary to think about. And because of that, you know that he's going to be really athletic, can really bend, can really do. He can really get back in pass protection because he has such long arms. He did play at a pretty poor FCS program that plays poor FCS program, so he'll have the competition level will be pretty stark when he gets to campus. But that's something that in the spring, if he can really explode, there's no reason that he couldn't be the starting tackle at K-State next year at either the left side or the right side. And I would imagine that he ends up playing on the left side because he's probably a better pass blocker at this stage than a run blocker. But he's a really fun addition because of how athletic he is. He plays at a position of need. And now you kind of look at it like, okay, they have Gus Hawkins. We don't know how ready he will be, but his potential is also through the roof. John Pastore has been somebody that we've heard about literally since the moment that he got on campus at K-State. And it's just been injuries that have kind of derailed him. And now you have Brandon Sney, who, again, has a really high potential. And I wouldn't be shocked if K-State adds another transfer tackle. So that leads you to feel a little bit better about the position than you did probably 24 hours ago.
Yeah, no doubt about it. How worried are you about making the jump from what you call a very sorry FCS program who plays other sorry FCS schools to having to come and battle in the Big 12, where that's a pretty significant boost from, I don't know what football conference Wagner plays in. I imagine they're probably in like the MEAC when it comes to basketball. But yeah, I'll look up the football conference because I'm interested now to see who they do actually play. Probably Long Island, Brooklyn, or whatever the the Blackbirds. I know they're the Sharks now. Long Island's the Sharks. I have no idea what the hell any of them are up there. They changed it. That's how sorry they are. I don't even know the school's name. So how worried are you about that being something that's in play?
My guess would be that they're in the NEC because I think that's where they play basketball in. But you kind of look at that, and that is probably the one thing that scares you a little bit. But I'm still of the opinion, and this is really gonna sound like Coach Kleiman here, that football is football, and you're a good player at any level, and you can figure it out. Like I'm not concerned about Marquavius Moss coming from West Georgia, who was in I think one of their first years as an FCS program this past year, and I'm not worried about him playing safety. It is a little bit more concerning along the offensive line though, because you don't want to get your quarterback killed. But I think that it will be a jump in something that probably takes a little bit of time, and that's where spring practice and then fall camp will probably get him more acclimated to the speed because, and we just talked about that we think that K-State's defensive ends are going to be really, really good for this next season. So if he can take that jump in the spring and in the fall, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, you're right. It is the NEC. Shame on me for getting that wrong. They do in fact play Long Island, who is now the Sharks, and they did lose 35-28 to LIU this year. Yeah, they not great, not great for them up there at Wagner, but God bless them for trying to play football in the Northeast. Yeah, I think this is one of those where you trust what everybody else is seeing because obviously it's not just K-State that wants him. You talk about the measurables are there. He's got some athleticism to him. Like there are traits and so much of really football in general and recruiting is traits. But you think about the offensive line, like that's kind of where I think a lot of these guys look at it and say, if we can give you the right coaching there, we just need kind of the base to make you a good offensive lineman. And obviously, I think they think that Brandon Sney has those skills. It's just going to be interesting to see how quickly they can get him to adjust and if he really is going to be able to lock down one of those starting tackle spots, which I think would be the goal with adding a player like this, correct?
Yeah, I'd say that the goal would be for him to at least compete for the starting job because it's kind of like I just laid out there of at worst, he probably provides an older player that can give you depth at a position that outside of Gus Hawkins and John Pastore, I'm not sure who would probably be that third player, probably Drake Beckwith, who I think has only played a handful of snaps at K-State so far in his career. So it probably is something that you need to have an older guy that you at least feel confident in playing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. As my daughter tries to tickle me back here while we finish this up. I think this is the way this class has kind of come together for K-State. It's exciting to think about, and they've gotten a nice little balance of the type of guys they've gotten. I think players that we anticipate as being immediate contributors, like no doubt about it. Other guys that have defined roles that may not be big, but you kind of need it. And then other guys that we've talked about throughout this process that you and I like hey, you were a big time recruit. It didn't pan out when you went to said big name school. Now you get a second chance. So, are you Gabe Powers? Are you somebody like Jaden Rowe or, Jayshawn Ross would fall into that category, but Ross is even different than those guys to some extent. The other thing that I think that you like is how many guys we're seeing that have multiple years of eligibility remaining. Sney falls in that category. Obviously, Ross is one of those that has many years left on it, and so many of these other players that are going to be able to be here for multiple years if they pan out and work. And this is setting K-State up to really showing how a healthy program in basketball or football, whichever sport, should be operating with the transfer portal. It is, okay, still build the base of your roster through high school recruiting, take your chances there, get those guys developed, and then use the transfer portal to kind of plug your holes. But in that process, also try to make sure that you're building depth through the transfer portal as well for multiple years, to where, it's not just one and done, one and done, one and done for all these portal guys. You want the players that have 2 or more years left, to where it doesn't feel like, if they don't reach their full potential, it was kind of a bust and it was kind of a waste. Like, maybe if Jordan Riley had another year remaining, we would view his situation a little bit differently. But I think a lot of people come away feeling like that one was a lost cause and not very beneficial for K-State. So you don't have many of those this year. And for the ones that you do, I think they're guys that we're not necessarily anticipating needing to be a crucial part of your success this upcoming season. A guy like Jaron Bradley, who I think there's a specific role that he serves this season for K-State. You're not bringing him in thinking he kind of needs to be our number 1 or number 2 receiver. If that happens, you hit a jackpot. But if it doesn't, you're thinking, we know what we're getting here. This was just something that kind of added a little bit more to the back end for us. So that's kind of the overarching view and statement of Kansas State with the transfer portal right now.
That's how I feel too. I think that there are times where you can go in and get guys, but you also have to just retain your guys. I think, especially in football, like football is a lot different than basketball. And I think that you can still build a team really through the portal in basketball and still do well. But I think that football is just so different because everything is so connected. There's more people that are playing. There's more people that are on the field. That if you go out and get like 25 to 30 guys from the portal every year, I just think that there's going to be such fluctuation in how you end up performing. Like, that's why I've said a few times now this off season that is only a few weeks old, that Texas Tech is going to be a hell of a case study, because Texas Tech has gone out, spent a bunch of money, gotten a bunch of portal commits. How are you going to keep everybody happy, number one? And number two, for me, the thing that has kind of caught me off guard is they're spending all this money, but they're building it around maybe the 7th, 8th best quarterback in the Big 12 from this past season, and a guy that has never really been healthy. So for me, it's more interesting in just an overarching perspective of like, is how Texas Tech does it, is that going to be successful? Or do you want to do something like K-State where really outside of Carver Willis and maybe Keegan Johnson and maybe Trace Spivey, K-State's returned pretty much everybody that they've wanted to. And then they've just added to it from the portal. So which way is going to be correct will be a fascinating study.
Yeah, which, I think about when you talk about Texas Tech, and part of that, it's true. You think about, okay, yeah, you can get all of these talented guys around, and maybe that's going to help out. Like, look at, much greater scale, because this is nationally in the Big Ten. But like, you would think of Ohio State and what they did with Will Howard. But if you look at the Big Ten, there's an argument to be had that Will Howard is probably the second or third best quarterback in the Big Ten this year. And that's that's factoring out the production just from what I know of Will Howard as a quarterback versus what I see the other guys do. I think most would say Dylan Gabriel was probably the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Like, if you were a Big Ten team, you'd probably want him. And then it probably comes down to Drew Aller at Penn State or Will Howard at Ohio State. Two guys that have a lot of talent, but also have some pretty significant flaws and don't always come through like people are thinking. So that's the kind of thing with Texas Tech. Then you break that down into like a Big 12 view, and you're kind of thinking, oh, what's the deal here? Because Baron Morton, if you're just trying to factor this in based off of, the easiest way to do it to sort right now is like PFF. He is 7th in his PFF grade this year in the Big 12, but I would say that there are guys to me that have had higher ceiling seasons than him, and that I think had down years this year that I would rather have the potential of their talent. Like Noah Fafita was worse this year. Rocco Becht was worse this year. Jalen Daniels was down there. Like, those are all three guys that I would take above Baron Morton. Also, if people are kind of trying to figure out where he falls in this, Avery Johnson, it was 5th in PFF grade this year behind Shadur Sanders, Sam Levitt, Garrett Green, and Josh Hoover, which Garrett Green kind of surprising, but the run game kind of props him up there. So Texas Tech will be fascinating. Now, you bring them up because of what they're doing in the portal. They currently have the top portal class in the Big 12 as it stands this season. And we know that there are numerous teams out there that like to brag about what they're doing in the portal. On3 gives out a performance rating, the P rating, and it basically tries to analyze not necessarily the totality of your team, but what you've done to improve your roster. That's how On3's transfer portal rankings work. How much better have you made your roster? So, for example, the performance score is the production that the team is bringing in during that process. Tech's average production score is 81.59, which is really, really good. Better than that, though, would be Oregon's 88.38 with the 8 transfers that they've brought in. But Texas Tech is number one because they have 17 transfers. It's made their roster better. And there's a pretty big gap between what they're losing off their team and not. The other one that I would point out, like Kansas has what is being thought of as a good transfer class by some. They've brought in 19 portal commitments right now. Their average performance rating is 69.37, which out of teams that are inside the top 25 of the transfer portal rankings, that is second worst. The only one that is worse is Minnesota, who's brought in 13. K-State right now with 11 portal commits, 21st in the On3 portal rankings. Their average P rating is a 71.45. So that's where, I think K-State's done a good job with it, but obviously the way that this gets evaluated, people are looking at it and saying they've done some good things here, but it's not a certainty, which goes back to what we talk about with like Jayshawn Ross, and that the ranking in the portal is more about what can you do immediately. K-State's got a lot of guys that I don't know that we know how solid their contributions will be instantly, but that's kind of how a lot of teams have to live, unless you're Texas Tech and you've got some oil money, or you're one of the big dogs in college football. So it's just kind of fascinating to follow. Go to On3 and KStateOnline.com if you want to find out some more about it and see everything that we are seeing there. Drew and I will have more throughout the rest of the transfer portal season as K-State kind of keeps that train rolling. And we have a basketball game this weekend. Woohoo. We'll talk about that and everything else going on with K-State football and basketball over at On3. So go find KStateOnline.com. For Drew Galloway, I'm Mason Voth. Thanks for watching and listening to the KSO Show.